Alright, it's been a while since I've done this last, but here we are again. Hello everybody and welcome to my Philippines vlog. Today it is currently 5:02 on, Thursday, May 9th. In about half an hour I should be leaving my house, and I won't be back for like another whole month. I'm going on my Philippines trip, just me and my dad. It's gonna be a lot of fun, I hope. I'm gonna see a lot of family. I'm gonna be vlogging again. I haven't vlogged really since like 2019, 2020 COVID, before COVID happened. But so yeah, it's exciting to be vlogging again, and it's exciting to go on vacation again. I haven't gone on vacation in like last time I went on an airplane was 2018 New York, so that's a long time ago. And I'm excited to go on this vacation again, and you guys will be joining me because I'll be vlogging most of it as long as my camera doesn't get stolen. But you never know in the Philippines. But yeah, I'm super excited. It's currently like I said, 5 o'clock, so it's gonna be we're leaving here pretty late. And I guess we're gonna get to the Philippines pretty late as well. We should be getting there on Saturday, low key. But yeah, pretty much done. I'm done everything packing. Just gotta put like my phone, my iPad, and stuff all in my my bag, and we should be good to go. I'm excited for this trip. Bye bye, bye bye. Well, there we go. I'll see the rest of them in a month. Got our luggage packed up. Time to head to the airport. Alright, so hello everyone. Very far into the future, Josh is me here, and I'm just here to give some extra context on some scenes because, for the most part, most of the stuff I filmed in the Philippines had no commentary whatsoever. So, get ready for some voiceovers. After a couple hours, we were able to get through security and then board the plane, and after a short flight, we were in Vancouver, which honestly had some pretty sick things around the airport. Also at this time, the Edmonton Oilers and the Vancouver Canucks were in the middle of their Stanley Cup playoff series, so I had to do the appropriate thing when I saw this sign. Okay, so we just got to Vancouver about like a couple minutes ago. It's currently like 10:15 local time. We left Edmonton. Oops, we left Edmonton not too long ago. About 9:30ish local time Edmonton. So now it's about 10:30 there. So no, it's what? It's almost 11. It's past 11 there. So yeah. We're in Vancouver now, and apparently our flight to Taipei is at 2 a.m. and it's currently 10, so we are going to be here in a while, but it's okay. I got time to kill. Probably take a snooze or something, I don't know. But apparently, yeah, looking at myself in the mirror in the bathroom, I look pretty bad. My eyes are red, and I'm sniffling a lot, and I do feel sick, but that's what happens. Oh well. Hopefully I'll get some rest and I'll feel better when I wake up / closer to 2 a.m. But yeah, I feel sick, I sound sick, and hopefully I just get better soon. Anyways, yeah, we're in Vancouver. Cool airport, by the way. I took some cool shots on the way here, but way cooler than Edmonton's airports. And technically starting the day off on Friday, we finally boarded the plane, and of course, there was a screaming baby on the plane. After our 9-hour flight, we finally arrived in Taiwan. We just got to Taiwan not too long ago. Just went through all security and all that. They're waiting by the gate for our flight. Look how nice Taiwan is outside. I've never been to Taiwan. And we're in Taipei right now. So there you go. And you can't see anymore. But yeah, it's another big airport here. Not as big as Vancouver probably, I don't think. But a very spacious one. And we're just waiting by the gate. We're here for like another lot of hours. And we got time to kill, so maybe I'll take a sleep. I'm sweating a lot though. I can't lie, I didn't sleep much on the plane, if anything at all. Also, I still feel very ill, so hopefully I get some well-deserved rest or something now, because I'm not feeling too good. But yeah, we're almost there. There's one more flight, and boom, we're in the Philippines. And with one final flight, we finally arrived in Manila, Philippines, technically on Saturday afternoon. We grabbed all our luggage and headed towards customs, except there weren't any customs at all. We just got our passports stamped and we just headed out the airport. Also, as I stepped out of the cool air-conditioned airport, I finally got hit with a good old humid air that my Canadian lungs just could not breathe. I swear, I was just walking along and then bang! Humid air. Anyways, I was also just sweating like crazy. But this is gonna be a pretty common thing going forwards. Eventually though, we meet up with my uncle and dropped off our luggage in his car, and he took us down the Filipino streets. He first brought us over to the duty-free store, which had some pretty cool decorations, but more importantly, air conditioning.
Afterwards, we got some lunch, and we had our first authentic Filipino food here in the Philippines. And after a 2-hour drive from Manila, we finally arrived at my aunt's house, which is where we will be spending a majority of our nights.
It's hot. Oh, it's hot. And the timer is at 30 hours. We'll just add an extra hour just for the delays before I start the timer. And so we've been traveling for 31 hours now. Or over 31 hours, I guess. You hear that? Cockle-doodle-doo, but there's actually a rooster outside that just does that. That's crazy. You always hear that in like movies, bro. Yeah. In the Philippines now, made it to my dad's childhood home. And we're just chilling there. It's 5 o'clock. Probably not much else is happening today. But I am tired. I'm sweating. And I'm so sick. So hopefully I'll get better tomorrow. Or whenever. Yeah, it's been fun. We went to like duty free today. Some fun things there. Bought some stuff. Had some good lunch / dinner. I don't know what that really was. And now we're just chilling, just packing up or unpacking all the stuff. And yeah, I remember going to this house like in 2015 back in the day, and not much has changed. Still I remember. What a day! What a long day! I cannot lie. 31 hours of traveling. Crazy. Anyways, see you soon.
Turns out, though, the day isn't over yet. Later that evening, my other uncle came over and brought his family. We then had a big dinner outside and just chatted the evening away. Later that night, though, one of my cousins came up to me after he came back from work. We're pretty close in age, he's just 2 years above me, and I feel like we had a lot of good things to talk about with each other. He also gave me the Wi-Fi password, and that ended off our first day in the Philippines. I started off Sunday morning, not much earlier than when I wake up here in Canada, which may be surprising because the previous day I was awake for more than 30 hours. But let me tell you what woke me up. Here in my dad's house, there are so many animals. Pigs, dogs, cats, ducks. And at the crack of dawn, these animals think it's so funny to get up and start yelling at each other. Especially these chickens. Holy cow. I mean, there actually weren't any cows there. But like, think of the sound that chickens make. Literally, that's the sound they made. And it was like that non-stop. It was crazy. But anyways, an early start to the day meant we have an early breakfast too, which involves some classic Filipino breakfast food, except I still couldn't taste it. Anyways, moving on. This morning was pretty chill and I just spent a good bit of time walking around the farm and seeing all the fruits and animals that were there. This was pretty cool to see because here in Canada, all we have are just like rabbits. It was pretty cool seeing all these different things here just in the backyard, including this scooter. Now I know this may not mean anything to anyone besides me and my sister, but I actually used to ride the scooter a lot back when we were kids here in Canada. But when we brought it up to my aunt, she said that one of my cousins used to use it when she was a kid, and now one of my cousin's son is using it. So from that I learned that A, I'm getting really old, and B, this scooter really got its mileage. But later on I had some boiled bananas straight from our garden right in the back. And then we rounded out the afternoon by visiting the nearby elementary school. And this actually has a lot of importance to my father, as he and the rest of his siblings all went here back when they were kids. As we returned home, we were greeted with a beautiful Filipino sunset, which brings me to something else that I had trouble getting used to, and that being the time that the sun actually went down. Now, especially around these months in Canada, I expect the sun to go down maybe 9, 10 p.m. But when I was in the Philippines, it started setting at like 5 or 6, which is why by the time we're eating dinner already, it's already dark out. But yeah, with yet another fantastic Filipino feast, it was time to end off the day. So our next day started off really early, and how early you may ask? Well, about 2 a.m, because today we were heading up north. Well, firstly to Manila, and then we'll take a bus there going to Baguio, which honestly I still don't know if I'm saying it right to this day. As we were traveling on the bus, we saw lots of the Filipino countryside and eventually some mountainous regions. In fact, Baguio actually has a higher elevation than Edmonton, which meant we were back to less humid air, which I very much appreciated. Our first stop was at this local park. It had a pretty cool fountain in the area, and additionally, we were also able to find a tourist information center, and we got a map that really helped us out while we were here. Also in this area was a monument dedicated to Jose Rizal, who was a very famous Filipino hero. And here's a side story. Back in 2022, when my hair was longer than it was now, a few people said my hair looked like Jose Rizal. And by a few, well, let's just say that if I had a nickel for every person who said I look like Jose Rizal, I'd have 2 nickels. That's not a lot, but it's weird that happened twice. But you know, after seeing what he looked like and seeing what I looked like in 2022, well, I see the resemblance. Anyways, we've eventually made it here to the mall in Baguio, which is near the peak of the mountain, so we were able to see a pretty nice view from the top floor. Unfortunately though, the clouds weren't looking the best at that time, which, spoiler alert, will be a common occurrence while we're here in Baguio. One of the things I got at the mall was some gongcha, and of course, I ordered myself the usual. Now, did it taste like the usual? Well, I don't know, I was still lacking some taste. But the one thing I did know was that it was a lot cheaper there in the Philippines. Later, we then made our way over to the cathedral nearby, and rested there for a bit. We eventually made our way back to the mall to enjoy some dinner and a rooftop view. As we made our way back to the hotel, we once again passed by the park, but now all the lights were fully turned on, and it made the park look really nice. So we decided to stay there for a bit and enjoy the evening. Starting off our second day in Baguio, we had some classic Filipino breakfast here at the hotel. We then took our first jeepney ride of the trip up to Mindview Park, which is another hilly area that overlooks parts of the city. Even with us getting there at 9 AM, there were still a fair bit of people, but we were still able to enjoy some really nice views. Later on, we then headed over to the mansion, which apparently is where the President of the Philippines stays when he's on summer vacation. However, on the way back it started raining, and raining hard, so we opted for a taxi to get back to the city, and we rode right back to the mall and enjoyed some lunch there. We then headed back to the hotel, mainly to deposit our pasalubong, and I enjoyed some strawberries. I think I enjoyed them, I still couldn't taste. Now, it was still raining pretty hard, so we had to stay in the hotel for a bit longer. But eventually, it let up enough for us to walk over to this market area, which we mainly scouted out for a future visit there. Afterwards, we decided to eat some early dinner at this nearby restaurant. I got myself some halo-halo, and honestly, I felt like my senses were coming back, so I was able to somewhat enjoy it. We then returned to the hotel, and I put on some Twice to end off the day. Starting off with yet another Filipino breakfast here at the hotel, we then took a jeepney over to Lourdes Grotto, which has a big shrine dedicated to Mary. But it was at the end of this arduous climb. We eventually made it to the top, and I lit a candle while I was there. There were a lot of beautiful statues and nice views to take in, so we took our time on the way down. And then later that morning, we made our way to the Philippine Military Academy, which is where all the cadets are trained to join the armed forces in the Philippines. However, to get to the main training ground involved another long walk, but there were lots of memorials, statues, and relics from past battles along the way. Eventually, we made our way to the main field where we were able to take a rest on the bleachers there. Also, we picked a good day to get there because they were actually doing practice for the graduation ceremony happening in a couple days. In fact, the President of the Philippines was going to be there in attendance as well, but that would have made things a bit too busy, so it's a good thing we got there when we did. We then made our way back to the mall once again to enjoy some lunch, and I was able to get this refreshing watermelon milkshake. Also, I think my sense of taste was starting to kick back at this time, so I was actually able to enjoy this and the meal as well. Later on, we made our way to this pond area, where we rented out this pedal boat to have a fun time out in the water. But this proved to once again be yet another workout, as you can see by me sweating under my hat. After that, we felt pretty tired, so we headed back to the mall to grab some dinner. I unfortunately didn't film the dinner, but I'm pretty sure we had some wings. But once again, the rain was coming down pretty hard, so we had to hunker down the mall for the meantime. But once the skies cleared, we made our way back to the hotel, and that's where I found out we did a fair bit of walking that day. Starting off our final day in Baguio, we began with a morning stroll through the park and enjoyed some nice weather. It was also around this time that my senses were pretty much back to normal. And what perfect timing, because afterwards we went to a local fast food place called Mang Inasal. We then headed off to the bus terminal, and we said goodbye to the mountainous city of Baguio. Of course, as it was raining. As we were driving back south, we were once again treated to some unique scenery. As we arrived back to where we started 3 days ago, the sun has already set, and it's not even 7 PM. Luckily at the terminal, there was a potato corner, so I got myself some fries. I mainly got this to compare to the Edmonton location, because recently I've been having lots of fries from the potato corner due to a location opening up on campus. Eventually though, we were picked up again by my uncle and his wife this time. After a short car ride, we arrived at yet another mall to enjoy some late dinner. There were many different places to eat at, so we walked around and enjoyed the open air part of the mall, but we ultimately settled at this Italian restaurant. We then ended the day at my uncle's condo, and now we are back in the city. Starting off the day, my uncle picked us up and we began driving around the city. And now that we're back in the cities, the temperatures are actually skyrocketing. So thankfully we were inside my uncle's air-conditioned car. Our first stop for the day is at my dad's old university. Now he actually graduated from this university back in the day, and he taught there as well, so I'm sure there was a nostalgic feeling for him, even if things looked a bit different than they did back then. We ended up staying there for a bit, because we went to my dad's old apartment where he taught, to see if there was anyone there who my dad would recognize. But who would have guessed, there was no one there teaching still from way back in the day. There was, however though, someone who was a student under my dad, and now works there also. So, we ended up chatting with him for a bit. After we were done there, we headed back to the road and towards the Mall of Asia. Also, as a side note, look at this cool animated guy on the intersection. He's going crazy! Anyways, when we started approaching the mall, this mall looked massive. And yes, I know it's the Mall of Asia, but this just blows West Edmonton Mall completely out of the water in terms of sheer size. There were so many stores around, and thankfully not too many people because we were there so early. Our first stop at the mall though would be finding a place to eat. So we walked outside and towards this pier area, and got some more looks at the beautiful Manila Bay. We eventually settled at this buffet to eat lunch, and we ate so much food. Now for most meals in the Philippines, I never really ate until I was full. However, because we were at a buffet this time, I made sure to eat as much as I could. So much so to the point where I felt like throwing up afterwards. And there were just so many options, but you know, most of them were Filipino foods. But there was still so much food in general. Also, there was live entertainment at the restaurant. But more importantly, today was my dad's birthday, so it was a great way to celebrate his birthday meal. And we even found this banner that we took full advantage of. After eating all that food, we began walking around the mall again to burn off everything we ate. And not gonna lie, there were so many things to do. Not only were there so many stores to go to, there were so many activities and places to take pictures with, like this dragon. Anyways, I do end up buying some souvenir stuff, and eventually we head over to IKEA and just spend a long time looking at the cool furniture stuff they have there. Eventually, we take our leave, and in order to do so, we need to go all the way down the spiral ramp in the parkade. Now, because we were leaving at about 5 PM, it meant there was rush hour traffic. In fact, there was so much traffic, it took us like 3 hours just to drive 20 kilometers. It was crazy. We were even sitting in the car so long it started to rain, and it rained hard. However, while we were there, you know, going 1 meter per hour in the car, at least I was able to see twice on this billboard. Anyways, we eventually made it back to the condo, and we wanted to grab a small bite to eat nearby. And the only closed place ended up being this place at the corner of the sidewalk that was selling some barbecue. I'm not gonna lie, this skewer actually tasted pretty good. But with that, the night came to an end. As the next day began, my dad and I went around to see what kind of amenities the condo had, which mainly involved walking around the pool area. But we did manage to take some nice pictures and take in the views while we were there waiting for my uncle to pick us up. Eventually though, he picked us up and we began our drive back to the jungle. Also on the way, we passed by this interestingly designed mall that, spoiler alert, we will revisit soon. Meanwhile, back in Canada, due to the time zones, it was actually my dad's birthday there. And even though my dad wasn't there physically, my sister and my mom made sure to celebrate with us over the phone. When we made it back home, we made it just in time to have some lunch. But we have to cook it first, and in the traditional way. And by we, I mean everybody else, because I just sat there and watched. But once that was all said and done, there was so much food to eat. Apparently, it was also their way of celebrating my dad's birthday, which explains why they cook so much. For a majority of the rest of the day though, we just sat around outside and talked with one another as more family members came around. However, later that day we drove out to a nearby lake and took in some more scenery and took some pictures together with the family. As we arrived back home, my dad and I kind of went our separate ways. He went out to catch up with some old classmates, and my eldest cousin took me out in a little vehicle they call an e-bike. But to me, it's more like a golf caddy. He took me around the area, and we had a nice little drive out together. He ended up taking me to one of my dad's cousin's house, who has an aquarium outside their house with many unique fishes. Which brings us to the end of yet another fun day. Starting off this new day, it was honestly a day we didn't have any plans for, so we just spent the day resting at home and not doing much. To be fair, it did rain for a bit that day, which was honestly crazy that the rain followed us even down here. We did go out for a small walk to play some Pokemon Go, and then my dad showed me one of his favorite pastimes, which was throwing rocks at mangoes when you wanted a snack, but we were pretty unsuccessful. Anyways, that ended off one of the few chill days we had in the Philippines. The next day began with my cousin bringing us some dessert. Now this is taho. It's a classic Filipino dessert with some pudding, tofu, syrup, tapioca. I'm pretty sure this is actually my first time having this, and it was pretty good. However, later that morning, we made our way to the local mall and browsed some of the baked goods they had. This is going to be important for later on, so we knew what kind of baked goods they would have for us to bring back to Canada. We also went to the grocery store in the mall and bought some essentials. Anyways, the mall was pretty nicely decorated too, so we took some fun pictures there as well, which includes me meeting and Hypen. I also got myself some freshly squeezed lemonade, which was cold and refreshing, but I think I still prefer Lemon Heaven. Also, for our meals that day, we got some rice and chicken for lunch, and some pizza for an early dinner, which took us to the end of that day. Now, this next day was also filled with a whole lot of nothing. I did, however, though, wake up really early because of all the barking going on outside. But some fun things happened at home, including me having some ice cream, going outside to see the full moon, along with some bats flying around outside, and watch my little cousin play around with the e-bike. But later that night, a new friend came along, because my cousin brought home a hedgehog, who he named Heggy. But yeah, that took us to the end of that day. Starting off the next day bright and early, with emphasis on the bright and early part. We got picked up by one of my dad's friends, and this was one of the few times we got to meet someone who wasn't in the direct family. We went along with her to drop off her daughter at high school, which coincidentally was my dad's old high school. So we took a picture on the campus grounds, which my dad said looked pretty different from when he was a kid. Afterwards, we went out to grab some brunch and get this Filipino soup dish called lumi. Later on, we went over to this resort because her two younger sons had some swimming lessons. So we just went along with them, and my dad and his friend just spent some time talking to one another outside in this beautiful weather. There was even a nice view from the top of the slide, but as my dad and his friend were catching up, I just spent my time chilling on the swing. Anyways, as we arrived back later that afternoon, we got to see Heggy the Hedgehog in the full light of day. Also, because my cousin noticed that we were spending so much time at home, he let me go on his computer while he was away at work. So I just hopped on his League account and started playing some TFT. It was pretty easy if I do say so myself, and I even finished first place 8 times in a row. Then, when the evening came around, one of my cousins spurred home some bubble tea for us. Also, my dad's sister from one of the southern parts of the Philippines came over and brought along her son. So we had some fun talking with one another and spending some time together as family. It was honestly a lot of fun and a great way to end the day. At the beginning of the next day, the wife of one of my uncles came by and picked us up and brought us to her house. We pretty much spent the whole day there, eating some food, watching some movies, and talking to one another. We spent so long there, my phone actually died while we were there, so not much of it was filmed, but I enjoyed my time there nonetheless. The next day once again began pretty early for me, as I was woken up by not only the chickens crowing outside, but also my little cousin pretending to be Beethoven on the piano. Anyways, later that day, it rained quite a bit again, limiting us from going outside. But that's alright, because my one and only cousin on my mom's side of the family came by our house to visit us. He brought along his girlfriend, and we had a great time just talking to each other and catching up. Like I said before, he's my only cousin on my mom's side of the family, so it's really nice seeing that part of the family. After saying goodbye to him, then came the big highlight of the day, that being my father's elementary school reunion. Turns out, a bunch of them still live in the area, and when they heard my dad was in town, they decided to hold a big party for everyone again. They rented out this resort for the night, and it really was located in the middle of the jungle. There was a pool in the center, a balcony overlooking the area, a bar area, which included this bell that I really wanted to keep, and of course, no Filipino party is complete without a copious amount of food. My dad just spent the whole time chatting with everyone, sharing some laughs and drinks, and I'm sure he had a really great time. Me, on the other hand, I spent this time relaxing, enjoying the beautiful weather, and watching the sunset. When night came, the whole vibe of the area seemed to shift. I spent the next little bit atop the balcony. I overlooked the party and just sat next to the neon signs up here. The karaoke machine was out, and everyone was having such a great time as the night progressed. Side note, I need to get a hold of this karaoke machine, because Itzy's Loco music video was one of the backgrounds they used. Anyways, one of my dad's classmates also hired some singers too, so that made the vibes here even better. Even I was having a great time by myself all the way up there. Everyone kept partying throughout the night, but I eventually made my way to the sleeping area to get some rest. But my dad kept on having a great time until 4 in the morning. However, unfortunately it was our time to go, because we had more plans for the morning. It was a bumpy ride as my dad and I got in the back of the caddy and made our way back to the house, but it was no more than an hour I'd say before we were back on the road. This time we were picked up by my uncle and his family, and we began driving over to the coastal city of Calatagan. Along the way, there were a couple cool things we saw, like this marching band, this decorated McDonald's that we stopped at for breakfast, and this amusement park that you can barely see. Meanwhile, back in Canada, turns out my mom and my sister were having some fun doing all the chores that my dad and myself took care of, such as mowing the lawn. Eventually, we made it to the coast, and we took this boat out into the open ocean. The weather was beautiful, the water was calm, and we were ready to have a nice day in the ocean. Honestly, the only part that ruined it for me though was how crowded it was. Even though we started there at 9 AM, there were so many people out there already. But despite that, it didn't stop me from getting in the water and having a lot of fun swimming with my cousins. And while the kids were out swimming, the adults were cooking some lunch for us on the boat. It was a pretty good meal, and it just felt so cool cooking and eating while being in the middle of the ocean. Afterwards, the weather started to become worse, and it turns out my dad and I were really cursed, because the rain just kept following us. But because of the worsening weather, we decided to cut our plans early and head back to shore, and move on to our next location. Our next location ended up being this resort area. We got 2 hotel rooms here, and the rooms here were pretty nice, and they had a nice view of the hotel's main attraction, the wakeboarding pools. This resort also had a nice view of the ocean, except the tide was really low right now, so everyone used this opportunity to walk into the intertidal zone. Not me though, because I am bringing chinelas. Also, the area that we were taking pictures in just so happened to be the hotel's restaurant, so we had some dinner there as well. And as we were waiting for our food, we were able to see some more beautiful views of the sun setting. Eventually, they brought our food out, and it was starting to show that we may have ordered a bit too much food. Even for a party of 9, we got nowhere close to finishing all of this food. As the evening progressed, it eventually started raining again, so we waited at our table for the rain to stop. Luckily, there was some live entertainment here, so that helped pass the time. But the rain never stopped, so we had to call over a small transport vehicle that would take us to our rooms and end off the day. Starting off the next day here at Calatagan, we once again made our way to the same restaurant, and we saw the high tide. We then sat down at the restaurant for some breakfast, with the breakfast being our warmed up leftovers from the previous day, which was really cool of them that they were willing to heat it up for us. But we also got some classic breakfast items like pancakes, fruit, and bread. But after that hearty breakfast, you know how earlier I mentioned that this hotel's main attraction was the wakeboarding pools? Well, I decided to try it out for myself. Some attempts didn't go too well, but I still had so much fun. Just look at my smiling face here. The wakeboarding and the trip to Calatagan as a whole was honestly the highlight of my whole Philippines vacation. It was honestly such a unique experience, and I was so glad to be here with my family. But afterwards, as we drove back to our house, we encountered a heavy storm. Like, heavy. Like, this was the hardest rain I've seen all trip, and probably the heaviest rain I experienced my whole life. And if you ask me, I reckon it was a typhoon. Trust me, I study the weather. It was actually so bad they had to send out an alert on the phone. And as a side note, if I was actually in danger, I'd be doomed because I have no idea what it's saying. Anyways, it turns out today was also the christening party for one of my cousin's daughters. So the whole house was decorated for such, and there was a lot of food too. Also at this moment, it was the first time in 9 years that all my dad's siblings were together in the same place, so they took a nice family picture together. We also took a picture with all the cousins together, but it wasn't fully complete because we were still missing my sister, as well as 2 of my other cousins. But honestly, this is a really nice picture nonetheless. The rest of the day we just spent at the house, and my dad used his time to sleep for 12 hours. I, on the other hand, decided to have some fun with the bugs that also wanted to get out of the rain too. Some of which were a bit too big for my liking though. But to end off the night, my cousin and I decided to have some fun together and play some games with our other younger cousin. The next day, I was quite startled to see this big moth in the house. I then had this nice snack of bananas dipped in sugar, and it tasted about how you would expect. And later, we made our way to the cemetery where both my dad's parents were buried, along with many more of my relatives. I didn't want to film much of it here just to respect those who are resting here, so I pray that everyone resting there, especially my 2 grandparents, can do so in peace. After spending some time there, we then visited the house of my dad's cousins. We took a big picture together and had some dinner there as well. But also, attached to their house, they have a little store. And while browsing their items, I came across the jackpot. There were so many K-pop photo cards, so I bought out their whole ITZY collection, alongside some Twice ones as well. And that was some money well spent, if you ask me. But after a short claustrophobic ride in the tricycle, we arrived back home, just in time to see the sun setting over the mountaintops. However, as the moon finally began to rise, the moths came out as well. From what I heard from my aunts and my cousins, apparently all these moths, which they call gabo gabo, always come out after heavy rainfalls, and they came out in numbers. There were so many of them we had to turn off all the lights inside and just keep the lights on outside in order to keep them out of the house. But because there were so many of them, the frogs and the lizards also came along and had themselves a mighty big feast. These frogs and lizards were actually eating so much, you could really see them getting bigger and bigger. That pretty much ended the day, but honestly with all the bugs outside, I don't know how I was able to get any sleep. The next day began with one of my uncles bringing us back into the city to the Venice Grand Canal Mall. We got there so early though, the mall wasn't even open yet, so my dad and I took some pictures around the perimeter of the mall. And apparently, this mall was decorated for Mother's Day or something, because there were all these bears around the mall. Eventually we made our way inside the mall, And the reason this is called the Venice Grand Canal Mall is because there's actually a canal in the center of the mall. So for one of our first stops here, we decided to ride the gondola boat down the canal. It was a pretty short and sweet ride in the intense sunlight, and our ferryman actually took some nice pictures on their phones for us. After taking a few more pictures around the mall, we stopped for some lunch, and it was a nice change to have some Western food again. But after walking around the mall for a bit longer, we then took a taxi to the other mall, SM Aura. Remember this mall from before? Well, we finally made our way back to it, and we spent some time exploring the inside of it. This mall also had some Mother's Day decorations, so we took some fun pictures around here too. And also with my homeboy, the jolliest of these. But besides all the picture taking, we also made sure to buy some snacks that we would bring home back to Canada. After getting picked up by my uncle again, we stopped for some dinner and made our way back home. Okay, if you thought that yesterday there was a lot of moths, prepare yourself for what you were about to see. This was insane. The amount that there were that night was actually crazy. I don't know where the frogs and lizards were, but they were really missing out. But anyways, with the swarm of moths just looming outside my window, it was time to call the night. The next day began with us unfortunately saying goodbye to my dad's sister and her son. It was really nice to meet him for the first time, and I hope we can see each other soon. Later on that day, we unfortunately got hit with yet another storm, but thankfully we didn't really have plans for that day anyways, so I spent some time gaming on my cousin's computer while he was at work. Eventually though, the weather started getting better again, and it was warm enough to get some Halo Halo. My aunt brought me some, and I hope my cousin didn't mind, but it's not like I was making a mess anyways. But honestly, that pretty much summed up the rest of the day. So, let's move on to the next. The next day began with my uncle and his wife bringing us over to my mom's hometown to meet with some of her family members. After a short drive, we arrived in the city of Mabini. Speaking of my mother, it turns out she has a store named after her here. Well, probably not really, it was just a funny coincidence. Anyways, we met up with one of my mom's sisters here, and we then visited the cemetery where her parents are resting. Once again, I didn't want to really film much of it here to pay respect to my grandparents, but I pray they rest easy and they enjoy their time in heaven. Afterwards, on our way to meet with one of my mom's cousins, we stopped by this place overlooking the ocean for some lunch. This place was really beautiful, and the views of the ocean were amazing. One of the benefits my mom's hometown has over my dad's is that my mom lived really close to the ocean, so during beautiful days like these, it was really nice to take in the views of the ocean. As usual though, it was extremely hot, and being in the sun for that long really built up a sweat for me. But we eventually made our way to my mom's cousin's place, and we spent some time with her and some local animals. That took up a big chunk of the day, so we began to drive back after that. After arriving back home, we once again had some Halo Halo to help deal with the heat, and we just chilled at home for the rest of the day. The next day began with me and my dad taking a walk around the neighborhood. Because our time in the Philippines was finally winding down, my dad wanted to say some of his final goodbyes to some of his extended family living here. Unfortunately, we picked one of the hottest days to do so, and I was sweating like crazy after we came back. After a little while, we then took the e-bike towards the bus stop, where we bused to the mall and bought some of the baked goods that we would take back to Canada. They were even nice enough to wrap it up in a little box too. Anyways, while we were at the mall, we encountered some more celebrities. We saw Bumblebee and this blue guy whose name I don't know. Like, I definitely saw him before, but I just don't know his name. We also bought some stuff at the grocery store, where they were selling these cans of Coke that feel like magic. But instead of buying that, I bought some more essentials. And after we grabbed some very mediocre lunch, we once again returned home and had some plans for the evening, but until then we just did some waiting around. But once the evening came around, my dad and I, as well as the whole family living here, were picked up by my uncle and his family. And he drove us out about 30 minutes away to go to this restaurant for our last supper in the Philippines. The location of this restaurant was a pretty cool place, because it was right next to a soccer pitch that we got to watch for a bit while we wait for our table. Because it turns out, asking for a table of 19 could lead to a bit of a wait. Amazingly, We all sat together at a table that fit all of us, and we all enjoyed some Japanese food. We ordered so much delicious food here, I definitely made sure to eat as much as I could. It was also just so nice being with so many family members here. It was a great Last Supper here in the Philippines. However, there was a little surprise in store. Even though we already celebrated my dad's actual birthday on May 17th, he has a fake birthday on June 1st, which is a pretty common thing with most Filipinos. This little surprise was such a heartwarming moment that I got to experience not only with my dad, but many members of the extended family. Upon leaving the restaurant, there was a little area outside that was nicely decorated. So we decided to take a stroll down the area, and the atmosphere at this moment was so relaxing. It really made this moment with all the family so memorable. There was even a busker nearby whose singing perfectly described how I was feeling at the moment. So, I'll let him take it from here. Overall, this was a perfect way to spend my final night here in the Philippines. And so begins our very long day and our journey back to Canada. Our flight wasn't until the afternoon, so we spent the morning getting our final preparations ready, and I took in the outside scenery one last time while sitting on the e-bike. And when my uncle came by to pick us up once again, it was time to say our final goodbyes. Firstly, to my biggest fan, who kept me so cool for so much of the trip. But then, to my actual family, who we promise we'll see again soon.
Bye.
Until we meet again.
Yeah, we'll meet soon. We'll meet soon.
We'll be meeting in Canada.
Oh yeah.
Pag-national na, musta yung
Bye. Bye.
Next time
Bye.
we'll be meeting in Canada. In the Philippines.
Wow. That would be nice.
winter.
Hindi, kahit hindi winter yun sa amin.
Oh, bye, Calix. Bye. Bye.
Yeah, wala.
Bye, Kalik.
Thank you po.
However, once we left the neighborhood the final time, we encountered some heavy traffic on the way to Manila. But we eventually made it to the airport, where we got these cute luggage tags to stick to our luggage, which I don't think we actually put on. Anyways, we made it through security with no problems, and we made our way down to the gate where we waited to board. And I also got a Subway sandwich with the few pesos we had left. While we were waiting though, we saw this really sick plane that we unfortunately were not riding. After one last picture here in the Philippines that reinforced our promise, we then boarded the plane. And after a 90-minute ride to Taiwan, we were once again in the airport except in a less crowded area. But there was also this really cool dog just chilling in the airport. We then boarded our plane to Vancouver, which would arrive in about 9 hours. Something that kept me occupied on the plane though was this Blackpink movie. But anyways, we once again returned to Canadian soil sometime on Saturday evening. We then grabbed our luggage, which brings me to a funny story. So after grabbing our luggage, we had to drop it off at the check-in desk for our flight to Edmonton, which was taking off tomorrow morning. We checked in all our luggage without any problems and we're like, alright, so are you ready for tomorrow? And the two workers there were like, tomorrow morning! It turns out they were only supposed to accept luggage for flights that were happening within 5 hours. However, even after they hit the emergency stop button for the conveyor belts, 3 out of our 4 luggage bags have already made it through. So as we left the airport, we simply had to cross our fingers that the other 3 luggages would make it on the plane safely, while just traveling around the conveyor belt for 10 hours. But we arrived at our hotel in Vancouver with only 1 suitcase. And the suitcase wasn't even that important. I'm pretty sure it had like the baked goods or something. We then took a stroll around to find a place to eat. So yes, even our small adventure in Vancouver will be included in the Philippines vlog. Think of it as like post-game content that you do after you beat a game. Anyways, we eventually made our way to a pier that we were able to snap some pictures at. But more importantly, we were able to find a place to eat that was still open. We got ourselves some nice seafood and watched the sunset to end off the day. After waking up at about 4 AM, we then grabbed a taxi right back to the airport. After checking in our 1 suitcase and hoping that the other 3 made it on too, we walked around the airport, which also looked really calm. But eventually we boarded our final flight, and in just a little over an hour's time, the city of Edmonton was back in our sights. It felt amazing to finally be back home after our long vacation. but I couldn't pass up this opportunity to take a picture with this sign at the airport. We then grabbed all of our luggage, which thankfully was all there, and we began to wait for my mom and my sister to pick us up in the same spot where the journey started nearly 1 month ago. And once they finally arrived, our Philippines trip came to an end.
Oh my God.
Man, it feels good to finally be home. Let me just go into my office and... What the